got you.
It's more of the unofficial title for a critical skills operator. So if you look at the Marine Corps manning documents and what's allocated to MARSOC for personnel, the actual guys on the team that are doing the work are critical skills operators. So when they go to selection and then they go to the individual training course, ITC, and they graduate and they're pinned with their Raider emblem, they become a critical skills operator. On paper, that's what they're called.
And how is that different than the other like soft forces? You know how the Army has the 18 MOS series, and they'll say, you know, if you're an 18 Delta, you're a medic.
Yeah.
Like, are the critical skills operators broken down into specific job duties, or is it just you're on the team, do what the team needs? Yeah,
that's one of the big differences between MARSOC and USASOC, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, is they, like you said, they have the 18 series MOSs with different specialties within that. They're all Green Berets. They all went through the same initial pipeline, and then they go to subsequent training to specialize in engineering or weapons or medical. Right, you have all these subsets that then they go to follow-on training for. Whereas MARSOC, they all graduate ITC, they're all Raiders, and then they may receive some specialized training on a case-by-case, but there's no additional MOS designators that would be applied. They don't career specialize in a particular subset of skills other than just being a Raider.
And ITC is the individual training course, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. I know there was some confusion because we're an intel focused company, and ITC to us is ISR tactical control. So
right.
Whenever we work with MARSOC, we have to always, we do a different type of ITC.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So what else kind of differentiates MARSOC from, let's say, USASOC or like the SEALs? I think fewer people actually understand MARSOC and what MARSOC is. And that would be, I think, helpful to just kind of say, why was MARSOC created and what makes them different? Why do we need MARSOC as opposed to just using one of the other SOCs? Like what makes MARSOC MARSOC?
The answer to that most people probably won't like from my community is you don't really need a MARSOC. Honestly, you don't. Donald Rumsfeld decided in 2006 that the Marine Corps was going to contribute to SOCOM.
Okay.
The Marine Corps had always avoided committing troops to SOCOM and got away with it by saying, we have the MU SOC, the Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operations Capable, that's part of our allocation towards the Special Operations mission.
Right.
So they would take a battalion of Marines, a Force Recon platoon, and put them through some more specialized training, like training for trap missions, mountaineering and different things that a regular infantry battalion does not train for on a regular basis. And then they deploy them on a ship and say, that's our contribution to SOCOM. Well, in 2006, Donald Rumsfeld, who was then the Secretary of Defense, said, all right, Marine Corps, that's enough. You're going to allocate troops to SOCOM that are going to be employed by SOCOM, not by the Marine Corps. Marine Corps is not happy about that because in the Marine Corps' eyes, all Marines are elite. All Marines, every Marine's a rifleman. Sure. That's the slogan, right? So they don't like having they didn't like the idea of having a group of more elite or special troops inside the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
So they were not happy about it, but Donald Rumsfeld didn't give them a choice. So in 2006, when Donald Rumsfeld signed the paperwork, the Marine Corps now had troops allocated to SOCOM. MARSOC is extremely small compared to both USASOC and the SEALs, NavSpec War. We're a tiny, tiny drop in a big, big bucket of special operations compared to how many troops are allocated across the other services. So capabilities wise, we don't have a large force that we can deploy at any given time, right? We have, I think they're still they change the force structure every now and again, but I think overall troop numbers stay about the same. But I think we have 3 battalions, So if you've got a total battalion deployed, you've got one in training and one in, right. And so it takes 3 to make 1 deployed minimum. So a battalion deployed is about what MARSOC can pull off at a time, which, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that significant. How many people
are in a battalion at MARSOC, let's say?
Let's see, when I was there, we had 3 companies and each company had 3 teams, and a team's about 12 guys.
Okay. So 36 per company. You said 3 companies?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking, 108 people
operators, not counting support, support personnel.
And the support element's even bigger, isn't it?
So that's one of the things that MARSOC has focused on as a differentiator from the other services is the support package. So MARSOC has definitely leaned real heavy into developing not just a robust support package, but highly skilled and highly trained support personnel. So they go through a very similar course to ITC that's more focused on whatever their specialized lane is. So they're called SOCs, Special Operations Capable.
Okay.
And then whatever their primary field is, it could be intel, it could be communications, it could be whatever it is. But they go through the SOCs course, which gives them the basic skills they need to integrate with the team and perform basic functions on a team, basic warfighting functions. But then they really drill down on their individual support capabilities. So if they were in the general purpose force and they were an intel guy, when they come over to MARSOC, they're going to go to special operations specific intel training that's going to bring them up to where they need to be to provide the support that's required in the special operations community that's different from what's required in the general purpose force.
I got you. So Donald Rumsfeld creates this, USSOCOM specific force from the Marine Corps. Is that about the time you were in 2006? Yeah. What was your timeline there?
So I joined the Marine Corps in, I went to boot camp in May of 2001. So I was in School of Infantry when 9/11 happened. And in 2005,
so you're in infantry school during 9/11.
Yeah.
Like, what was that like? What's going through? I mean, you're talking about probably a bunch of 18 to 20-year-olds. Did anybody have any idea what that would mean for their entire, like you're with a group of kids entering the military. There's no war happening.
No, we joined during peacetime. Everybody that was in with me at that point had joined during peacetime Marine Corps. And when I got to School of Infantry, I was assigned a 52 area guard. So they just grab random guys out of whoever's going to the next class to do things like guard the armories and the ammo supply points and stuff. It's supposed to be a 2-week thing, and then you class up with the next group, right? So I was in this thing called 52 area guard. We're just pulling guard shifts. I think 4-hour shifts, 24 hours a day for like a 2-week period is what it's supposed to be. So we're doing that, and we're sitting in the barracks one day, and the sergeant comes in and says, Twin Towers just got knocked down. We're going to war, and then walks back out.
Holy shit.
And
of course and
we're 18 years old, dude. I'm from the middle of Wisconsin. Like, I'm like, what's he mean Twin Towers? What's he talking about? Like, I don't know what World Trade Center was.
Yeah.
I come from a town with 1,800 people in the middle of Wisconsin. I think I've been to New York at that point, but I didn't know what a World Trade Center was. I didn't have a reason to. It didn't mean much to me at the time. And we're in a barracks. We don't have television or anything like that. Smartphones weren't a thing yet. We all would run to the payphones at the end of the day to try to call our girlfriends. Because we didn't even have cell phones yet. Like cell phones were a thing, but not everybody had one. Yeah. Or like 2 weeks out of boot camp, so people just got money for the first time. So we were very, very restricted on the amount of information we had at that point. But we knew things were serious when they said your guard duty's been extended by a month because they're shortening up the training cycle for infantry Marines coming out of boot camp, and they're trying to push as many through as they can because we're expecting to deploy massive amounts of troops almost immediately. And we're like, okay, so
something's happening.
Something's definitely going on. Little did I know that would equate to me spending the next 13 years at war in 2 theaters. When I left active duty in December of 2013, my peer group that stayed in ended up being at war in both those theaters for their entire 20-year career.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Iraq in 2003, 2005, and then my peer group after I got out were back in Iraq again fighting ISIS in the teens, right? Like 15, 16, 17. They're back in Iraq again.
Amazing.
Fighting a different enemy this time, right? And we were still in Afghanistan from 2001 all the way up until, what was it, a year and a half, 2 years ago when we shut that one down?
Yeah.
So we ended up spending the longest time at war of any generation of U.S. troops ever. I mean, Vietnam was 10 years. World War II was 6?
Mm-hmm.
Korea was 2, 3 before the armistice. So yeah, we had no idea that one day was going to turn into 20 years of continuous warfare and the development of MARSOC.
Right. Well, that's crazy to consider. So you're in boot camp. Drill sergeant comes in and says, "Towers are struck. We're going to war. I know you Marines. You all are like going, yes."
Game day.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I get that. And obviously the years to follow probably have aged you a little bit and, maybe caused you to reflect back a little bit. I always see Marines because we live here in Wilmington and we see young Marines, and I can point out a Marine a mile away. Like, short hair, kid. He's got a group of 3 others with him, walking
None
around.
of them are
downtown.
dressed the same.
None of them are dressed exactly. One of them's kind of weird, which is always the case.
They're all kind of weird.
And they're, they have all the bravado in the world, which is great. And I think you want that from a young Marine, right? You want them to be like kind of headstrong and think that they can rule the world. So,
boot camp does a great job of that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about too is, maybe we can kind of go through your career and then get into it, but like the evolution of what's happening with the military and I know I get your face right there. Like I get it, right? It's like,
but here's the tough thing about that, right? So talk about what's going on in the military right now, and you got guys like me and my peer group who are just mortified by what's going on in the military. But also, if you think back to past generations, there were other guys who were mortified by changes that took place during their time period.
Right.
Right. There's always change. And it always seems like the end of the world to the people that are used to it being the way that it's been for 20 or 30 years or maybe longer.
Yeah.
So it's you got to balance out your reaction to it with context of we've been through change before as well and survived, and the military is still effective and productive. So it's tough. It's easy to get worked up and say, I don't agree with everything. And then you look back at some of the other changes the military has gone through, which ended up being the right decisions in the long run. So it's tough, but we can get into it if you want.
Well, I mean, it's a little different. It's a little different if you disagree with the new uniform that's coming out, right? Like that's kind of like, we all have our favorite uniforms and things like that. And everyone on the outside can debate that because it's visible and something like that.
Right.
But that's different than, let's say, a discussion around lowering standards. I'll give you an example.
Yeah, that's a great one. Let's get into that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I read this article the other day. It was from the Marine Corps Times, I think. Marine Times. And this is into that kind of lowering standards thing. The Corps will now let some enlisted Marines who have twice been passed over for a promotion stay in service in a bid to boost retention. So this is getting rid of the up or out policy, basically. What are your and this isn't the only policy, obviously. That's on the chopping block.
Right. And you can find a dozen examples from the other services as well.
Yeah.
Not just the Marine Corps.
But your experiences in the Marine Corps, like what are your thoughts on getting rid of that standard, the up or out? Like
I would double down on tightening up the standard because let's face it, the minimum standard to be a Marine is not that high. It's not. Like the lowest bar you have to pass to be a Marine is pretty low. It's not that difficult, right? So if you're getting passed for promotion, you are not, there's a lot you're not doing right. And are you the guy that we want to stay around and lead other people? Because the way the Marine Corps works, like you said, the up or out policy, that means like you're not just progressing in pay, you're progressing in responsibility, and you're being put in charge of more people. So if you don't have what it takes to be in charge of yourself and meet minimum standards, are you the guy we want to be in charge of other people and make sure they're meeting the standards? Probably not, right? Like we don't have a professional private in the U.S. military.
Right.
Like if you go over to, the British military, you have a guy there that can be a private for his entire 20 years. He stays a rifleman on the team because that's where his potential ends. That's where his comfort zone ends. Now he can continue to get paid more and get pay increases and longevity pay, but they're not going to force leadership onto a guy who's not capable and not ready for it. And they're like, well, he's a good rifleman. He's a good private. Should we kick him out just because he's not going to be a good sergeant?
Right.
Well, no, if he's a good rifleman, then keep him around. The Marine Corps' policy is, well, if he's a good rifleman, but he's not going to be a good sergeant, we got to get rid of him. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, you can argue that all day long, whether that's a good policy or not. But I think the idea of saying, well, this guy can't get his act together and get promoted twice already. Right. Let's invest more time and resources into this guy who can't get his act together to try and force him to lead other people when he can't lead himself, rather than cut your losses and work on developing the next guy in line. Mm-hmm. You know, if you got an E6 who can't do it, there's a hungry E5 there. There's a hungry sergeant out there that is capable of doing it and can do it. And you've got this E6 that's taken that promotion spot that's not allowing that sergeant to move up in rank because there's this deadbeat sitting in front of him. Well, get him out, get him gone. Let the new guy take over.
And that retention policy that they're looking at scraping, it's obviously in reaction to the recruiting problem. I mean, that's what it really is.
Well, it's reaction to the recruiting problem and the retention problem. But the retention, you don't solve. It's like business, right? Like you run a company. We've all been in business. You don't fix personnel problems by trying to cater to your worst performers.
The lowest echelon.
Right? What's that do? It de-incentivizes your best performers. So when you see resources and time being spent on the worst performers, what do the best performers decide to do?
Yeah, they're like, get me out of here.
I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere where I'm valued.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens in the military. When guys don't feel like they're being taken care of and being treated properly and receiving the right advancement opportunities, but they see the people not performing, receiving the resources and the attention to try and get them ahead. Well, where's the incentive to be a top performer and stick around the organization? It's just not there.
Yeah, you can be in the Army, we have, and I'm sure this is the same in the Marine Corps, maybe a little bit different. In the Army, we have the E4 mafia.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many people that get kind of stuck at that E4 level and they can't kind of get to the next one, or sometimes they just come in as E4. I think if you have a college degree and you enlist, you can come in right away as an E4. So there's like this layer of E4s in the Army that kind of run the show everywhere. They're usually really capable people, and they should know their stuff at that point if you're an E4.
Right.
But we've always had that term, the E4 mafia, run the show.
Yeah, we have the Lance Corporal underground.
There you go, the Lance Corporal, and a Lance Corporal is
E3.
In E3. Okay, yeah. So that makes sense in the Marines. It's a little bit harder to get promoted in the Marines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Typically.
So, like, kind of hitting back on the recruiting struggles, this is a massive issue. You hear people talk about, is this a national security issue? Is this a threat to facing China and the world? And here's an article I read from the Dispatch. Several branches of the U.S. military projected to fall well short of their recruitment goals for the fiscal year, despite numerous initiatives undertaken by all branches designed to attract as many quality recruits as possible. A problem military brass says doesn't have an easy fix. Okay, so here's some of the numbers. The Army has been the hardest hit by recruiting struggles. It missed its goal by 25%. That's 15,000 soldiers in fiscal year 2022. Remember, the government fiscal year ends in October. Mm-hmm. It is projected to be about 10,000 soldiers short of its 65,000 recruit goal for this fiscal year. Here's the Air Force. The Air Force, the Chair Force, 10,000 airmen short of its goal in 2022. And the Navy expects to miss its target of almost 38,000 active duty sailors by 6,000. What the hell's going on, man?
I don't think it's that complicated.
Yeah?
I don't. I think the fix is complicated, but I don't think the reason for the struggles are complicated. I think it's rooted in society. I think it's rooted in the culture that we've developed within our country. Mm-hmm. Is the lead contributing factor to it. And then now you've got top brass in the military kind of embracing that culture and reinforcing it within the military, which is just making it tougher. And
when you were a kid and you decided to join the Marine Corps, like what got you to that decision?
Well, and this is where I'm going with the culture thing. So today's generation, and I hate using terms like this because now I sound like the old crusty guy, right?
Yeah.
And I'm 40. I'm not the old crusty guy that's yelling at people to get off their lawn yet, right? But there is a clear difference in demographics in young people now compared to what it was like 20 years ago or 40 years ago, right? So things do change. Society does change. And one of the problems that we have within, this is my opinion, one of the problems I think we have within our country is we have developed a society full of instant gratification and selfish people who always ask, what's in it for me first, and how quick can I get it? So there's a lack of selflessness. There's a lack of appreciation for service and what it means, right? You don't have people that do things just because they're the right thing to do or because it's good. They do it if they're properly incentivized and from a selfish perspective to do it. And I think that's contributed from a breakdown in family.
To play devil's advocate, though.
Right.
To play devil's advocate, isn't there an incentive to join the Marines as an 18-year-old that has no money and is just starting out? I mean, you get educational benefits, you get health benefits, you get everything kind of taken care of.
There is, and that's part of the problem is I think the military is focusing too much on buying recruits, right, rather than trying to get people to join for the right reason. I didn't get a bonus when I joined. I didn't need a bonus. I joined a year early to guarantee that I would get an infantry slot.
Right.
And most of the people I served with were like that. We didn't care about college benefits. We didn't care about, we wanted to be Marines. We wanted to deploy. We wanted to, go be war fighters. And I didn't know if it was going to be 20 years or 4 years, but it's something I wanted to do. And I had heard, I didn't have any family that served. I had a grandfather that served in the Seabees during the Korean War and built airstrips in the Philippines, right? But nobody, my dad didn't serve, so I didn't have any family exposure to service. So I'd heard, the Marines are the hardest branch or the toughest, boot camp's the worst and all that. Well, what do you want as a young man? You want to be challenged. You want to feel like you've accomplished something and you want to feel some self-worth.
Young people necessarily want to be challenged as much as they want a sense of adventure.
But I think they go hand in hand, right? Yeah. Like you don't play sports because it's easy. You don't join the football team because it's easy. You join the football team because it's hard, because you get a little bit of status within high school by being on the football team because you're doing.
And you get girls, let's be real.
But why do they get the girls? They get the girls because they're being manly, right? Because they're doing something that's tough or perceived as tough and hard, and they have the camaraderie of the team, right? And they're doing something that the rest of the high school isn't willing to do.
Right.
So they get the status that goes along with that because they're doing something that's challenging and hard. Anything that's that we assign value to is because it was hard to get. If it's handed to you for free or it's easy to get, it's not valued by whoever receives it. So when you say, I'm going to give you all these free things if you come do this for me, I mean, what do you expect out of that kind of a guy?
Right,
that's the guy I would expect that gets passed for promotion twice, that now we're trying to incentivize to get his act together so that we can keep him around.
He wants a bonus for being there, right? He wants to be incentivized. Well, you mentioned kind of, culturally some issues, and you can't overlook obesity. This is a massive problem in the country.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
This is from Google's generative AI, which you can now integrate with their search. So as of 2023, 41.9% of American adults and 19.7% of children, again, 19.7%. That's 20%. That's 1 in every 5 kids are obese. This affects 100.1 million adults and 14.7 million children. That's just one issue.
It's a major
of the
issue.
Children are obese, and obviously obesity leads to other issues.
All kinds of things.
So you're General Roth here, and you need to hit your recruiting numbers. Okay. You're short by 10,000, right? How do you spur a generation of obese children to join the Marine Corps?
That's a tough one. I think I would take the approach of not trying to cater to them. I wouldn't cater to them, right? They're trying to cater to these people and cater to their selfishness and their meism. Look at the Army's recruiting slogans over the last 20 years.
And they've just changed that, which is actually they did an awesome job.
What is it now?
Oh, it's back to be all you can be. They changed it. They
be
realized
all you can be, right? It's about you. And it was an army of one for a while, about the individual. Right. What can we do for the individual, right?
But the idea of be all you can be is supposed to the idea wasn't necessarily a selfish one. It was about tapping into that sense of adventure that I talked about.
Yeah.
Like you're young, you know, like who knows what you're going to do, but if you join the army, you're going to find out. Like you can take it as far as you want to go. And I really like that. The army put out this really cool video. Maybe I'll put a link in the description on the podcast. A great recruiting video. And I was like, okay, they're starting to get their heads around this a little bit. But you know, back to General Roth, like what's the package? How do you solve the problem? I mean,
yeah, I think the incentives that are in place are fine. You know, they've got the GI Bill, which is great because if you decide not to stay in for past 4 years, minimum enlistment, you can go to college, you can go to trade school, you can get a pilot's license, right? You can do all kinds of things paid for by the government that's going to set you up for the rest of your life. So if you go have 4 years of fun and adventure and you decide that's it, like you're taken care of. I don't think there's a lot else you need other than that. The pay's good. I mean, how much should you pay a 19-year-old private? I mean, you see what happens. I don't know if you've seen it in the Army, but I know what happens at Camp Lejeune when you take an 18-year-old and you give him a steady paycheck for the first time in his life. He goes down to the auto shop and he ends up with an F9000 pickup truck that he polishes every Saturday because he can't even afford to put gas in it because his payment's so high, right? Yeah. Like they've got plenty of money. So it's not a lifestyle type issue, right? To get these guys in. I think the incentives are there. I think it needs to go back to the old fashioned recruiting style. If you go back in time, you can probably find it on Google and you look at the old Marine Corps recruiting posters, right? You've got the drill instructor that says, "We don't promise you a rose garden," right? Screaming at a guy. Like where the emphasis is more on the challenge. It's more on transformation. Like what you just explained about the be all you can be, that from that perspective, that's great, right? Like we're going to take you from what your parents created, which is this out of shape, fat, unproductive little thing that can't get anything done. And we're going to put you through a process that's going to turn you into a machine at the end of it. And we're going to give you all the benefits and education you need to succeed for the rest of your life if you decide you don't want to stay with us forever. Right? That's the kind of person you want, somebody that wants to go through that wants to become better and wants to be part of more, right? So we need to put an emphasis in our country back on service. The media has done a great job over the last several years of trying to divide us up into different subcategories, ruin patriotism, get us arguing amongst ourselves. It's really hard to convince a kid then when that's what they're surrounded with, that America matters. When you've got people telling you all the time that it doesn't matter, that America's terrible because we do all these things. Right. How do you get somebody to join the military if that's the messaging they're getting all the time from through the media?
Yeah. How do you recruit a black child when they're told nonstop how evil America is because of slavery hundreds of years ago?
Or now a white child who's being taught that they're terrible. And the white patriarchy is terrible because of things that happened in the past too. Right. Well, now I'm just supporting.
Why would you fight?
I'm just supporting this terrible system that's responsible for all these past atrocities. If I participate in that, right? So there's a lot of negative messaging about America, about the military, about the country. Not to mention the breakdown of family values. There's church attendance isn't great and that sort of thing, which creates this sense of service and selflessness, which is what you want in the military. You don't want a bunch of individuals that are there for themselves. Right. How does that shake out when you put 50 guys in a combat environment together and they're all there for their own personal reasons? They're not there for the country and they're not there for each other.
So, I mean, you're not just talking from a place of ignorance. You're talking from experience.
Yeah.
So I was hoping maybe we could go through some of that experience. Like you get through your basic training, you go through everything. Like at what point do you join MARSOC, and then when When does all the deployment start?
Yeah, so it was 2005. I was deployed to Al-Qaim, Iraq, with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. And I re-enlisted while I was there for another 4 years. And I had the option in the Marine Corps when you re-enlist, a lot of times you can reserve an option for orders, which means you get to pick where you're going next.
Nice.
So you could say, I want to go to this unit on the West Coast. I want to go do a B billet, like be a drill instructor, be an instructor at the School of Infantry or something like that, which is usually what a lot of guys do because that's part of the promotion process. You do a B billet, it makes you more eligible for promotion down the road, that kind of thing. So I had this option for orders. I didn't really know what I was going to do yet. I had time to think about it. My operations officer, Major Johnny Day at the time, called me into his office. He's like, hey, man, what are you doing when we get back from deployment? It's like, sir, I don't know. I have option for orders. I'm not real sure. He's like, well, I'm going to this new unit called FMTU. It's Foreign Military Training Unit.
Yeah.
So I've never heard of it. He goes, well, it's brand new. I never heard of it either till the other day, but it sounds like it's going to be fun. It's going to be a bunch of sergeants on a team together doing stuff. You should check it out. I said, all right. So I said, I'll check it out. What do I got to do? So he sent an email to the master guns that was at the unit at the time. And they set me up for when I got back from deployment to come over and like an interview or something with the master guns. So I went over there to this FMTU, the Foreign Military Training Unit, when I got back. And the master guns was actually out of office. So some other master sergeant was there. And he's like, all right, yeah, this is what we do. Do you think you want to come over? I said, yeah, it sounds fun. It's like, all right, well, we'll get your orders issued then. So it was like pretty simple.
Right.
And then I found out it's even simpler than that because I get there and I find out other guys just woke up in the morning with orders. They never even heard of it. They just woke up and they're like, I got to go to this. What's this FMTU thing I got to go to? So that was in 2005. So I checked into FMTU in December of 2005. We didn't really know what we were doing at the time because we were all conventional troops from all over the Marine Corps. We were all infantry troops. We were all combat arms from different units. We had a major and a captain on each team. And we were building out a pipeline to get ourselves trained up for not what we knew. We didn't really know at that point, but we were like, well, we need some training for some things. So we started building a pipeline for that. And all we really knew was that we were going to be assigned to go overseas to whatever country we didn't know. And we were going to train other countries' militaries, which what we find out later is called Foreign Internal Defense, FID. Right, it's what Green Berets specialize in. It's what they do.
So it sounds like Green Berets to me.
Yeah, we didn't know that at the time. We're just a bunch of knuckle dragging sergeants that think we're going to have a good time. So we get over there in December. We start doing this pipeline thing, and then I think it was, I'd have to look. It was I think June of 06 is when everything was finalized with the Secretary of Defense and SOCOM, and we did our activation ceremony at H1 on Mainside Camp Lejeune. Rumsfeld and his crew flew in for it. We did this formation. It was super corny because they brought the Marine Corps band down.
It always is.
They continuously played the Mission Impossible theme song throughout the entire thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was like the worst way you could have done that, right? Like,
and this is what you're talking about is the formation of MARSOC.
Yes. Yeah, so we stood in the activation ceremony with Donald Rumsfeld and the current general. I think Halig was the first commanding officer of MARSOC at the time. And we go through all that. And then that was FMTU then became the Marine Special Operations Advisor Group at that time.
Okay.
And then I want to say it was either that same month or like a month later, they chopped wholesale all the Force Recon guys over to MARSOC. So they just took everybody from 2nd Force Recon and 1st Force Recon and said, you are now 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion and 2nd Marine Special Operations Battalion. So basically overnight, they snapped their fingers.
And you were part of Special Ops.
And you are now MARSOC, right? And we're like, okay, well, what's that mean to us? Well, it meant a lot of really good things to us. We didn't know it at the time, but what it meant was lots of money from SOCOM for training. Right. We weren't dependent only on the Marine Corps budget anymore. We had SOCOM money now for things like what you guys do. Right. So our support started going up. Our training started going up. And I'll say that first 2 to 3 years at FMTU becoming MSOAG, the Marine Special Operations Advisory Group, which then became Marine Special Operations Battalion 3 and 4 for a little while, then back to just 3, and then eventually 3rd Marine Raider Battalion is what it is now. So I went through all these changes for that first couple of years as they were trying to figure out what this was supposed to look like. But that first 3 years was the best 3 years of my entire Marine Corps career. It was absolutely awesome. I worked with the best dudes. We had very little bureaucracy above us. The command structure was not robust yet. We didn't even have a regiment at first. We just had a component and then the battalions. So there just wasn't a lot of brass. And because everybody was new to this, nobody had any experience. Nobody knew what really we were supposed to be doing. So we could pretty much do whatever we wanted. So we'd look at a mission. They'd say, hey, you're going to go to Tajikistan. That was the first deployment I had, was Tajikistan. Like, you're going to go work with the...
Hold on a second. Where is Tajikistan?
It borders Afghanistan and China.
I am supposed to be this geo guy, right? I own this company. I have no idea where Tajikistan is.
East of Afghanistan. Like, the Mozari Sharif is close to the border with Tajikistan.
Okay. All right. I got it now. Of course, it's right near Kyrgyzstan. It's on the stands.
Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan.
Okay. It's actually just dead north of Afghanistan. Okay. All right. So you're in Tajikistan. Yeah,
we get assigned to where they tell us, hey, you're going to go to Tajikistan and work with their border guard. Like, all right, well, what does that mean? They're like, we don't really know. Send an advance party there, go meet with the country team. So then we had to learn what a country team is, what that consists of, and how to interact with them, because interacting with the ambassador and their staff at a U.S. embassy is a whole nother thing, right? It's super political. There's certain ways that you interact with these people. They're not real thrilled about gunfighters coming into their country because they're very Department of State oriented, which is, wells and saving babies, not guns and killing things. Right. So you have to tread very carefully and politically there to do what you need to do. So we had to educate ourselves on that. We interviewed former ambassadors and people from country teams to get smart on that and what that was going to look like. And we flew in there and met with the country team and said, hey, we're going to be coming in. This is what we're assigned to do. How can we support you? What do you need from us? And like, well, we think you should work with this battalion of the border guard who's going to be responsible for guarding the border between here and Afghanistan and helping interrupt narcotics flow and that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of how we started out. But because nobody knew and we had to figure all that out, we had huge left and right lateral limits to determine what our training was going to look like. So we start researching Tajikistan. We're like, okay, super remote environments. Even their capital city is not that modern. Like, they turn the gas on twice a day for an hour in the morning and the evening for people to cook. Otherwise, the gas is off. Power goes out randomly all the time. Austere environment. Roads are terrible. So, all right, we probably need some off-road training. We're going to be renting, civilian vehicles. We're not driving military vehicles there. So we send guys to like off-road driving courses. We go to like rally racing school.
Nice.
Yeah. So like we'd go to Bridgeport. They have mountains. We're like, hey, we're going to take our team out to Bridgeport and we're going to train in the mountains with the Marine Corps Warfare Training Center for a couple of weeks. So we'd be able to design and tailor our training based off what we anticipated we were going to be doing. It wasn't the standard Marine Corps model of everybody receives the exact same training, no matter where you're going. And then you figured out when you get there, all the teams got to look at their environment, whether they're going to South America, Africa, Tajikistan, and say, this is our environment. This is how we're going to be operating. These are the skills we need to have to be successful. Let's spend the next 12 months developing these skill sets, and then we can go execute. So it was a total blast. It was so much fun.
Did that rally driving training ever come in handy?
In an official capacity, probably not, but it could have, right? Because, if you have to escape and evade, these are high threat environments. I ended up working in Pakistan for a while, and
which is the worst.
Yeah, and I'm running around in local clothes, man jammies, we call them, the shalwar kameez, and I'm driving a forerunner, a nondescript forerunner, and if I
full beard out at this point.
As much of a beard as this guy grows, which ain't much.
All right, you're good. You got it going
I got
now.
8 whiskers. But while we were there, we had suicide bombers jumping over the police station a block from us and killing Pakistani cops. We had UN vehicles that were getting ambushed and shot up. So it was a high threat environment. And if I would have gotten in a situation where I needed those driving skills, to get out of an area, they would have proven extremely valuable. Fortunately, I didn't have to use those during my deployments. But yeah, the training was super relevant to what we were doing, which is why we did it.
So you kind of get assigned this mission. You build a training package. You go through training. You go to Tajikistan. And what comes next?
Well, so we did those missions for a while. We had teams. When we first got to FMT, they assigned us by region and language.
Okay.
So I was assigned to a Russian team. We called them Russian teams. And we deployed to former Soviet republics like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, because Russian was still useful enough in all the former Soviet republics that you could learn one language and deploy to multiple countries and have it be useful. It wasn't necessary to learn Tajik and then go learn Kyrgyz. Right, because you could still get by with Russian because it was such a thing for so long that it was still predominant enough to work. Kind of like learning French and going to Africa. Right. If you were going to Africa, you'd learn French or maybe Arabic rather than trying to learn the 1,000 different local African dialects. Because of colonialism, you could get by with French almost anywhere if you learn that. Same with going to South America, you learn Spanish. Unless you're going to Brazil, then you might need to learn Portuguese, Brazilian. But so we focused on learning the major languages that would work the best over a large area. And then your team would specialize in that region. You'd learn languages. So they told me to learn Russian. I did an immersion training in Moscow for 2 months where I went and lived with a widow in an apartment and went to language class every day. And then I went back again the following year for another month to develop my language abilities and ended up getting pretty good with it in a relatively.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, I can still get by. I'm better with my passive rather than active abilities. Like I can listen to conversations and tell you exactly what's going on. And then my ability to jump in now is not as good as it was. My active recall is not as great as
not so many people around Wilmington, North Carolina that speak Russian that you can really practice with.
You'd be surprised.
Not really.
Yeah.
More here than we thought.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we kind of stayed in those regional lanes for a few years. Meanwhile, first and second Raider battalions or MSOBs at the time were rotating in and out of Afghanistan.
Okay.
And then after a few years, force structure started to change, priorities started to change, SOCOM started asking for different things. Then we started rotating in 3rd Battalion teams into the Afghanistan rotation as well. And then teams from the other battalions started doing JSETs in other places. So things started to mix up a little more. With my time at 3rd, I ended up getting involved in some very specialized training. It was a very high demand, low density skill set. So I went over to 2nd Raider Battalion and deployed with Hotel Company in 2010, and then with Fox Company in 2012, TAD and XS from 3rd Raider Battalion.
What were you doing there?
Afghanistan deployments.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was interesting. It was a lot different than my time in Iraq was. For 2000,
where were you at in Afghanistan?
In 2010, we operated out of Herat.
Okay.
There's a big coalition base south of Herat. We had half the base was owned by the Italians, and then the other half was owned by the U.S. And then we had our little soft camp kind of in the middle of it.
Okay.
And my team went out, and most of the team went to Kabul to train the 9th Kandak. So they took all the recruits that came in for the 9th, basically Afghan Commando Battalion.
Sure. And
they spent, I want to say 3 months or 4 months training the 9th Kandak. I went straight to Herat and started working on my own there for the first 3 or 4 months, waiting for the team to get there with the commandos. And then when we brought the commandos over, then we started working operations in Western Afghanistan, Herat province up through like Baghdis with the 9th Kandak.
When you say working operations, this is going out every night and doing raids on certain individuals, or what? Like what?
Yeah,
what
we
were
had
you doing?
We had targeted ops where we were going after specific individuals. We'd also go out for a week or 10 days at a time on we call them like presence patrols. We'd go to areas that we knew were hot areas and drive around and, wait to get shot at and pick a gunfight and that sort of thing. So
you were getting shot at pretty regularly?
Yeah. Afghanistan was, it wasn't urban. Like Iraq, everything I did in Iraq was very urban.
Right.
So it was very close. Afghanistan, the fighters there are really smart. They're really good. They're actually really good fighters, the Afghans.
Right. Not
the government troops, but the insurgents, the Taliban. They're really good. They always employ their weapons at max effective range. They always have egress routes established prior to engagement, motorbikes staged. They knew about how long it would take for air support to get on site and target them. So they were really good with setting up their ambushes and engaging from max effective range of their weapon systems for a limited period of time, and then getting on their motorbikes and trying to get out of the area before air support would get on site and light them up. So it was definitely a more challenging environment because they're just better fighters, and the terrain was different than urban. You couldn't isolate them as well. We had a lot of decisive engagements too, where it was a little different than that. But on a whole, that's kind of how it went for us. Is max effective range from their crew serve weapon systems and trying to pin them down, chasing them down on 4-wheelers and dirt bikes and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I was there in 2015, but I was at Bagram Air Base.
Yeah.
And my experience was they shoot a mortar in and then they get out of there. It's just like you're saying, like they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
They'll shoot a few of them or they'll shoot a rocket in.
Yep. And they'll go away and come back the next day and do it again.
There, using I forget the CRAM to try, we're shooting, 50,000 rounds at this mortar or this rocket.
Yeah.
And they're just like some dude on a bike. The whole time I was thinking, man, we're spending a lot of money to knock down these rockets that probably aren't going to hit anything. Or every now and then they did, which was bad. But my thought was always like, man, we're spending way more to shoot down these little things, and they're probably using some old thing from, the 1980s that they found laying around from when Russia was there.
Yeah.
To shoot at us, and we're spending thousands of dollars to shoot it down. Who knows? Anyways, so were you in Iraq before Afghanistan? Like what?
Yeah, so all my Iraq deployments were with conventional forces.
Okay.
Prior to going over to FMTU and MARSOC.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were in Iraq as a normal infantry guy?
So my first couple trips were with Marine Corps Security Force Battalion.
Okay.
I was when I first got in the Marine Corps, I went to School of Infantry. Then I went to what they call gun school, which is security force training.
Okay.
And they call it gun school because you get qualified on a couple additional weapon systems like pistol, shotgun, and different things that aren't part of standard infantry training. And then I was signed to 2nd Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team.
Okay.
FAST. They call it FAST. And I was in Yorktown, Virginia. What FAST companies do is they send a platoon forward deployed to like Bahrain. That's where I went for my deployment with FAST. Was NAVCENT, Navy Central Command in Bahrain. We go to Spain, other places like that. And what they're supposed to be doing is they're on standby in case there's a need for a NEO. Which would be, gosh, I should be able to remember this acronym, but non-combatant evacuation operation. So evacuating like an embassy.
Yeah. Okay.
So like Benghazi should have had a FAST platoon there.
Right.
Why no one called FAST platoon in? I don't know, because they had 50 super trained, fully armed war fighters on the ground, probably in an hour. Wow. So I was forward deployed to NAVCENT, and then from there we got forward deployed to Iraq to go work in Iraq for most of that deployment. And then from FAST, I went to 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and then went back to Iraq with them.
So you talk a lot about training, and I think that's something that people maybe that have not served in the military think about. Training is super crucial and super important. Has there ever been a time in your military career where that training just kind of kicked in automatically, on any mission you were on or anything like that?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. All the time.
Does anything come to mind?
I mean, combat, you react, you don't think most of the time, especially initially when rounds first start firing, you're on automatic response. At least I was. So you default to whatever your lowest, simplest level of training and actions are. Because the initial surge of chemicals and endorphins that you get kind of overwhelm you for a second, and you go straight into just react mode for the first at least few seconds. At least that's how it worked for me. So basic motor skills, things like that are really what you're capable of. You lose fine motor skills for a while, which is why when you train in your weapon systems, you train gross motor skills. So like on the side of an AR-15, there's this little button that you push. M4 is what we call them, but general public AR-15 is a little button you got to push to release the magazine, to put a new magazine in to reload, right? Well, we don't train to find the button with your fingertip and push it, because that's a fine motor skill. We train, take your whole palm and smack the side of your rifle, and your palm somewhere is going to hit that lever and release that button, because your brain can pull off this motion when you're completely overwhelmed with everything going on around you. This is too fine, right? So you intentionally create muscle memory patterns that are gross motor skills that are easy to pull off no matter how overwhelmed you are. So that when you're in that initial situation where you're completely overwhelmed, your mind hasn't caught up with the situation yet, your body can react and perform basic functions like return fire, reload, shoot, move, communicate, seek cover. Like all those things just become automatic. You don't have to think about them.
So what was that like? You're talking about, using these gross motor skills. What was that like for you the first time that kicked in? Like, what was the circumstance and what?
So I think the first time I was in a really intense situation like that, I didn't even have a chance to respond initially. It was in Iraq. We were in Al-Qaim, and we were doing, I can't remember the name of the operation, but it was a very large battalion-sized operation. We were clearing out this area. We kicked this operation off by shooting a MICLIC down Main Street. MICLIC's a mine clearing line charge. It's a 4-inch fire hose filled with plastic explosives. It's a couple 100 feet long, and it's launched with a rocket. And it drapes it down Main Street because the IED threat was super high, and blew that up in order to clear the road from any possible hidden explosives and that sort of thing. I mean, so like that's how we kicked this off, was by shooting this thing down Main Street before we went into the city. So it was a pretty big deal operation. And so we were going house to house, clearing this city out of bad guys. And we get to this house, and this old man came out of it. Probably like, I don't know, he looked like he was like 90. I don't know how old he was. I didn't get to ask him, but old man, all bent over, gray beard, everything, right? And the platoon commander says, "Hey, when you go into that house, there's an old man just went in there. I know we have non-combatants in there. We have civilians in there. So go non-lethal when you go through the door. Don't throw frags in the front door. Let's, because we're war fighters, but we're also good people. Like, we're not there to just kill everybody. Like, there's nothing in it for us to kill women and kids and old people, right? We're there to kill the fighters and not the local populace. So we're trying to do the right thing. My squad's the one that goes into this building, and we open up we throw flashbangs instead of fragmentation grenades when we get the door open, and we go in and we see the old guy at the end of the hall dart into a room. So me and two other guys, we start moving down the hallway, and we're clearing rooms as we go. And there's a stairwell to the right, and the two guys next to me are getting ready to go up the stairs. And I grabbed Adam on the shoulder, and I said, "Hey man, wait till you got enough people before you go up the stairs. You don't know how big the second floor is, how many rooms might be up there, that sort of thing. You don't want one or two guys going up there on their own and getting in a gunfight, not having enough people to support it." So I hold him up. I say, "Make sure you got enough people before you go." He's like, "I got it." And I go past him. I make it like 2 steps past him, and it's weird how your senses get overwhelmed when things happen. So all I knew is there's a lot of stuff going on. I don't really remember hearing anything. I don't remember hearing gunfire. I don't remember hearing explosions. I remember getting shoved from behind by my saw gunner. Like I heard commotion. I started to turn around and I got slammed into by my saw gunner, who basically tackled me down the hallway, yelling grenade as he did it. And then I find myself like around a corner. I look back, the hallway is completely full of smoke and dust. You can't really see much. Adam's laying on the ground, not moving. And I don't really know what happened at this point, other than there was an engagement in the stairwell and grenades were thrown down the stairs as well. And that was all I really knew. So I was overwhelmed. I had 2 guys from my squad that were with me. The rest were on the other end of the building. And at least one of them was laying down, not moving at the bottom of the staircase with, we didn't know what, still at the top of the staircase. So now we've got an unknown threat at this top of the staircase over one of our guys. We don't really know what we're dealing with at this point yet. I don't know if there's 10 guys upstairs or 1 guy upstairs or no guys, and it was just a booby trap. I don't have any idea what's going on at this point. But I do know that I've got an AAV outside with a 50 caliber machine gun on the top of it. And I know I don't have any guys upstairs yet. So I take the one guy that's with me, I go around outside and I go to the AAV commander and I say, level the second floor, just start putting rounds in it. And so they open up the 50 cal and just start chopping the second floor to pieces with a 50 cal. And then I see the rest of my squad at the other end of the building, and they're lobbing grenades over the roof. They're standing at the base of the building and throwing grenades over the edge of the building, not knowing what's above them either, if someone's going to lean over the top and start shooting. So we start providing suppressive fire, not knowing what the threat is, over the top of the building. And I get to the rest of my guys, and a couple of them are pretty banged up. One's holding his arm like this. The platoon leader was there at the time, right? And he keeps yelling at this guy to put his arm back in the air, because every time he put his arm down, it'd spray blood all over everybody. Oh, God. So he'd put his arm down and blood would start spraying out and getting in everybody's face and stuff. So he kept yelling at him to hold his arm up in the air, like, "Hey, dickhead, put your arm up in the air." Because the pressure would help keep it from spraying out all over everybody. Right. He had ended up he took a round through the front of his bicep, and it went out his tricep, but didn't hit the bone. So he had a pretty clean flesh wound, but it was pumping blood all over the place. And a couple of the other guys took a lot of fragmentation from the grenades, that sort of thing. And so we get those guys, tell them, hey, get back to the AAV, seek cover, treat each other, self-aid, buddy aid, corpsman aid, that sort of thing. Take care of each other. And then we knew we still had Adam inside. Felt like we had the threat suppressed from the top. We get to the door, we look in, the whole building's full of smoke and dust. You can't really see what's going on. Yeah. You can kind of see shapes where doorways might be or might not be. I think we had me, the platoon leader, and my saw gunner were the only ones there at that point. And I went through the door, platoon leader followed me, saw gunner followed me. And this is where you asked about like gross motor skills and stuff like that, right? So I go down the hallway, I get to Adam, who's laying on the floor. He's dead. It was pretty apparent he was dead. His eyes were wide open and filled full of, dust and debris and stuff like that. And that's one of the things we train on to tell if a bad guy's dead, is you flick him in the eye. It's called a dead check, right? You flick him in the eyeball, and even if they're in a coma, they'll twitch. Like their eye will react to that. So that's a really good way to determine if somebody's actually dead, is to poke them in the eye. Okay. That it's dead check. You flick them in the eyeball.
Somebody's flicking you in the eye. They're making sure.
Yeah, even if you're unconscious, your body will react to that. Even if you're unconscious. So the fact that his eyes were wide open and full of debris, like, it was fairly certain at that point that he was dead. There was nothing, not much we could do about it. I didn't see that at that point yet. I just knew I needed to get him out of the situation. So I get up, grab him by his armor, and try to drag him. And I just keep falling down because it's concrete and it's covered in dust and stuff now, and my boots slip. I weigh 90 pounds over my body weight with just my armor and weapons and ammo. And now he's, his body weight plus his equipment. So I'm trying to pull like 4 times my body weight, out of this building on this slippery concrete floor. And I just kept falling down as I'm trying to pull him. My boots kept slipping. And then my saw gunner gets up and grabs onto him. The 2 of us are able to move him, and we get him out and get him outside in the light and see what I see. And it's like, okay, well, there's not much we can do for him at this point. Right. And then I talked to, afterwards, later on, we're talking through what happened and everything. And I talked to the platoon commander, and what I had no idea was going on while I was trying to pull him down the hallway as my platoon commander was over the top of me because we couldn't see. We still had no idea what the threat was. Second floor is on fire. They're still shooting 50 cal rounds through it. So whatever's up there, if it's still up there, is either dead or suppressed, right? But we didn't know if now it was on the first floor, how many, anything like that. So my platoon leader had been shooting into all the doorways down the hallway the whole time. So he was over my head with his M4, just dumping rounds down the hallway into all these open doors. I never heard a shot fired. His muzzle was this far from my head
and you couldn't
the entire time. And your brain shuts out everything that it doesn't need to do whatever it's focused on at that point. I never heard him shoot once. I didn't know he was shooting until he told me afterwards that he went through like 3 magazines providing suppressing fire down the hallway into all these rooms that we didn't know what was in.
While you're carrying your buddy slipping on dust.
Yeah, until after it was over with. He's like, yeah, man, I shot like 3 magazines down that hallway right over your head. I was like, I never heard a shot fired, not once the whole time.
That's wild.
Yeah. So your brain and you have no control over that, right? You can't be like, oh, I want to hear things. And now you can hear things. Like it just happens. So you have to tailor your training to account for how your brain reacts to those situations so that you can get through them on a default mode.
It sounds kind of like a dream. You know how sometimes when you wake up from a dream, or I've had this dream before where I'm trying to speak and I can't talk. And I've had another one where I'm trying to like move into another room, but I can't walk. I'm like crawling with my arms. And there's nothing else that makes any sense. Does it seem kind of like a dream to you at this point? I mean,
things feel super slowed down. You feel like things take minutes or longer that only take a few seconds, like because you're tuning so much out that your perception of time disappears. You don't realize how long or how little time you're spending on a particular activity. It's super weird. And it's different every time too. I remember this training program I was going through, and this old crusty Navy SEAL was one of the instructors. And he said something during this training program that really resonated with me, and it stuck with me to this day. And he was talking about after a gunfight, you know, when you go to do your team debrief, he said, you need to keep in mind that every gunfight is different for every guy every time. You know, not everybody has the same experience each gunfight, and not everybody's experience is the same from gunfight to gunfight. So you need to keep that in mind when you're doing your debrief and you're looking at how things went and how things could have gone and how they didn't. He said, you know, you could be in a gunfight where everything goes right. You get an ambush, you jump out of your truck, you got your gun, you're dropping bad guys, everything's working fine. You're like a rock star, you're killing it, right? Like bad guys are dropping, everything's working, your reloads are going good, you're not having any malfunctions. Whereas the guy on the other side of the truck, when he went to get out, his equipment caught on the seatbelt, he tripped, fell, ate shit, you know, his nods broke his nose, he's bleeding all over himself, he's got a mouthful of dirt, he can't see anything. And his experience during that 4 minutes was completely different than your experience during that 4 minutes.
Right.
And it wasn't any fault of his or yours, it's just how things went. You know, and the way you react as an individual when you're put in those situations can be different each time because there's a degree of it that's completely out of your control. How your mind and body reacts to certain things, you don't always have control over that initial thing. And that's why that training is so important, is to override the body's reactions through gross motor skills and training. So you default to that baseline of actions and activities because you've done them 1,000 times to where you don't think about them. They're automatic. And that gets you through that initial blast of chemicals and that puts people in that fight or flight stage. Your training gets you through that. And then that after that initial chemical dump starts to wear off, then you get your mind back. And now you can do your critical thinking about, okay, let's organize. What do we need to do? But for me, that initial couple seconds, it's just return fire and figure it out. And then, you know, it's different. It could be 10 seconds. It could be a minute before you're like, okay, now I'm thinking again.
Right.
I don't know. You ever been like a car wreck or something where you get that adrenaline rush and all the other, they call it the chemical cocktail, and you don't really know what's going on initially. And you're not thinking from an analytical standpoint. You're just, am I broken? Are they broken? You know, is everything okay? And then 2 seconds later, you get that flush and you're like, okay, now I can think, I can process, get the seatbelt off, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in some situations, nothing as vivid as that, as an intelligence person. Luckily, I don't have, I wasn't going out there knocking down doors and stuff like that. Hopefully I was providing perfect intelligence, and the people that were just going, man, this guy knows his stuff.
Right.
But that, it sounds like a kind of an experience that kind of makes or breaks people, and you always hear about post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. And it makes perfect sense to me, because it sounds like an incredibly stressful situation, especially when you have time to reflect on that,
Yeah. Yeah. Cause a lot of guys, you sit and you take that situation and you relive it a million times, and you look at your own individual actions and you're like, if I'd have done what different, how might things have been different?
Right.
May Adam have not died had I made a different decision about how to approach that building. Right. And I know that's something that Lieutenant lives with.
Right.
Because he said, go non-lethal because there's a civilian in the building. Well, what we find out later is that was a new tactic they were developing to lure you into complacency, as they were capturing civilians in order to make it look like it was a non-threatening environment. Meanwhile, they would have fighters inside to ambush you.
Right.
Right. And that was the first time we'd been exposed to that. I mean, that's what these guys would do, is they didn't care who got killed in the furtherance of their objectives. Yeah, they didn't care. Right. And so that's what was done to us on this one. So, I mean, I know the lieutenant, had to wrestle with the fact that he said, don't use grenades. Now, I don't know that grenades would have mattered at that point. Right. The guy was upstairs, so a grenade in the front door may not have done anything, but I know he struggles with giving that order and taking the lethal approach out of the, the mindset of going into that building with lethality at the forefront of our minds, rather than there's a civilian in here, rather than there's a threat in here. Right. So I know he has to deal with that. I have to deal with, did I handle the stairwell correctly? I told him to wait for more people, but should I have just stopped and gone up with him? Should I have gone first? Would that have changed things? How did I react after the chaos started and I knew he was laying at the bottom of the stairs? Should I myself have gone immediately up the stairs to try to eliminate the threat, to try to get aid to him sooner? Should I have taken more Marines to push up the stairs? Or would that have just resulted in a bigger pile of bodies at the bottom of the stairs?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how many guys I had left at the time either. I knew I had 1, 2 with me, but I didn't know where the rest of my squad was, how many of those were wounded, or I didn't know if anybody outside the building had any idea what was going on inside the building. So there's a lot of information you don't have, and you have to make quick decisions with the information you do have. And unfortunately, those decisions you have to make are life and death for lots of people. And so you have the rest of your life to sit and question every one of those decisions. But it's not healthy to do that. You do the best you can while you're there, and then you have to just let it go. You did the best you could in that spot, in that situation, with the information you had and the resources you had at your disposal at the time. And it does you no good, other than from an after action perspective of how you might handle that situation in the future should it arise again. It does you no good to sit and armchair quarterback yourself and dwell on it. Learn what you can from it and then move on. It's over. Yeah, but it's tough to do that.
And I get it from the perspective of that lieutenant, and even your perspective, how I'm telling you right now, that would bother the hell out of me if I made a decision that I knew caused one of my friends and teammates to be killed. I would that would mess me up for sure. I'd be like, man, I should have made a better decision. Or
you don't know. You don't know if
information as you have.
Yeah, but you don't know if it did or it didn't.
Right?
Like,
yeah, you don't know how
he could have.
It's a crapshoot.
Yeah, he could have not said anything. He could have been like, hey, approach this building just like you do every other building, and it may not have made a damn bit of difference, right? We could have had the same result regardless. But the unknown of, had he not said anything, had he not changed our tactics, is the question he wrestles with.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't have made any difference. The tactics of it wouldn't have made any difference, right? We would approach the stairwell the same way. You're still fighting uphill,
right,
around a blind corner. And what we found out afterwards from the guys that were with Adam, so Adam took a round through the face, guys, and dropped dead immediately. the guy that got shot in the arm that was standing next to him, and then the other 2 that were with him. When we talked to them after, what we found out happened was this guy just stuck his AK-47 like this around the corner, sideways.
So people listening, he's holding his arms out to show that he's holding the AK sideways.
Yeah, so he didn't even expose himself. He just exposed his hands and his gun.
And pulled the trigger.
Sprayed down the hallway a magazine of ammo, and then threw 4 grenades around the corner that bounced down the stairs to the bottom of the stairs, right? So they never even had a target to engage.
Right.
So I don't know that there's anything we would have been able to do that would have been different in dealing with that stairwell, other than having tried to enter the building from the 2nd floor and clearing down. Which, we could sit and...
Was that an option?
We could sit and talk about how feasible of an option that is when you're clearing 300 buildings a day.
Yeah.
Right. And you have the ladders and the time, and now if you're on a ladder climbing, now you're exposed to sniper fire and everything else while you're on this ladder trying to get to the 2nd floor. And then you're on the 2nd floor exposed to everything around you, 360 degrees with no cover while you're trying to get in. So there is no good answer. You
bring up an interesting conundrum, I guess. You said that you're clearing 300 buildings a day, maybe more, maybe less. Was there any instinct or any feeling on that particular building that was like, something's off here? Like, was there anything that kicked in that was like, this is a little bit different? Like, was there an instinct to that, or was it just, this is just another building?
Nothing that really, other than this old guy came out and went back in again. But that was also common. Like, the civilians that could evacuate usually did. But a lot of times old people were left behind because they couldn't travel.
Right.
They couldn't walk away. And people don't all own cars. Like, it's not like, here there's a hurricane coming and they tell you evacuate. Everybody packs up all their important stuff in their car, their pets and stuff like that, and they drive inland. Right. Well, there, when you tell them we're going to come destroy your town and everybody that's left is dead at the end of it, well, they don't have cars. They don't have mass transit. So everybody grabs what they can and they start walking through the desert. Right. And not all the old people can make that journey.
If you're an old person, you can't.
So a lot of the old people just get left behind, and they sit in the house with whatever food supplies they have available that were left for them. And they just sit there and they hope to wait it out and survive it. So it's not unusual in those situations to see, people that are left behind that couldn't go.
Gotcha. So there's no clairvoyance you could have had, no instinct.
Not really. I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
And that's the other thing that makes it tough, especially from a hindsight perspective, right? There's not like, you don't know what you don't know. There was nothing that stuck out that was weird that you should have seen. It was just another building, and unfortunately it cost at least one Marine his life, and one probably a good use of their arm at least.
He didn't even go home. Yeah, the one that was shot in the arm, he stayed out there with us. He's like, no, I'm good. I don't need to go home. I'm fine. It'll heal up. And the doc agreed with him and said, yeah, it's you took a round through your muscle. It'll heal from the inside out. So we have to kind of plug the wound and let it heal from the inside. And I want to say it was about a month. He was back in the field with us.
Just round through the arm, no big deal.
Yeah,
going back out.
That was his attitude.
Yeah.
His attitude was, I don't need to go home. There's people that are way worse off than I am. I just got shot in the arm. I can still use it. It hurts, but I'll be okay. So he took the time to let the wound heal up so it wouldn't get infected. And then he was back out with his platoon. He didn't even go home. And he could have just taken his Purple Heart and went home, and that been the end of his enlistment. But he chose to stay.
He chose to stay. Well, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, the type of people that you want to serve with, and the type of people that should be joining the service are the people that have that perspective of, I'm out here with my team. These are my people. This is where I'm at.
It wasn't, I only did this for the college money, and this is my golden ticket to get out of here and go put that to work. No, his reaction to it was, we already lost one guy. We're down one guy in our squad. We've got 2 other guys that are injured as well. I'm needed. Their survival might depend on me being here for the rest of this deployment. I'm not going home because they need me. After having already been shot and watching his best friend die in front of him, he still made that choice. That's the guy you want. You don't want the guy that's like, I can't wait to go get back to college now. I get to get out of here and go home.
Can't wait to go study humanities. Okay, so So that was the Iraq deployment. How many times did you go to Iraq?
I went twice with FAST and once with 3-2.
Okay. So you do Iraq a few times and then Afghanistan, and then, man, it sounds like you've been everywhere.
Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan. Those were, Bahrain. I had some other
all the finest places on earth that you would ever want to go to.
I didn't have to fight in the Philippines. I had buddies that went there and did that. I never been to Asia, Southeast Asia. That was pretty hot for a while. I've been through parts of Africa, but never did a deployment there. Never really operated in Africa at all. So mostly Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Okay. So you had 4 people from your platoon commit suicide. Mm-hmm. Do you think is it linked to that story, or is it just other shit?
I think suicide in the military is a complicated thing. Right. I don't know. I think it's a very, very complicated issue. I don't think you can do a direct causal relationship to anything that says this is what caused it, right? I think there's so many factors that contribute to getting a person to that point to where they feel like that's the best option. And I say best option, not only option, because there's always other options. And I think that people that were in the military are very used to planning and considering options and making decisions based on the viability of the outcome, right?
Right.
And so I think when a veteran decides to kill themselves, I don't believe that it's they look at it. You don't get to interview them afterwards, right? But I don't believe that when they do it, they're sitting there going, woe is me. I feel terrible. This is all I have left. I'm going to kill myself. I think a lot of times it's a more analytical approach where they're able to look at it from a slightly detached perspective, because death is not an unknown visitor to them. Right. So, in boot camp, we run around yelling kill all day long. We attack the chow hall and then yell kill 3 times before we get to run in the door and eat breakfast.
Right.
Like everything revolves around death and dealing it and accepting that it's coming to you and your buddy and everybody else, and learning to just be okay with that. Right. Like I planned my own funeral multiple times. There's a requirement with SOCOM before you deploy. You fill out this big packet with the photo that you want to have sitting on your casket, what music you want played, what you want read and spoke at your funeral. You do a will, all this, like you plan your own funeral over and over again before deployment, right? So you become very accustomed to the idea of death and that, your time's limited, and you feel like every time you get back from deployment, you're already in bonus years anyways, so death's on the table, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like it's on the table as an option because you're so used to it. So when I think a veteran gets to the point of suicide, that's just one of the tools that he has in his toolbox for how he's going to deal with whatever his life situation is at the time. It's not the last resort. It's just an option that's being considered because death is a viable option to him or her. And sometimes that option maybe seems like the best solution when he considers his life situation in aggregate, because I think they're considering more than themselves, because most people would look at suicide and say that's an extremely selfish action, right? Because you're screwing your wife, your kids, your parents, everybody you leave behind. You're hurting them by doing that. So people look at it like, well, you're weak if you commit suicide. You're selfish if you commit suicide. But I think somebody that gets to that point is considering all those factors.
Right.
And they've gotten to the point where they believe that they're a bigger burden by being around than they are by being gone. And I think it's less than about them than it is more about how they feel that they're having a negative impact on everybody else's lives. They feel like they're holding back their family, that their substance abuse, potentially, or their alcohol abuse, or their lack of productivity, their inability to secure meaningful employment, their constant negative mood, or whatever their problems are at the time, have become such a big burden to the people around them that they've analytically decided that the best way to solve this problem for everybody else is to just not exist anymore. That if they're gone, everybody else's lives get better. And so I don't always like to think that it's necessarily a woe is me, this is the best option for me. I think a lot of them probably come to it from an analytical perspective of my life situation is not what I want it to be right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's an option because it's my friend, I'm used to him, and I can execute this option and immediately provide life insurance benefits to solve the financial problems that I've put my family in since left service. And I won't be this negative guy who's sitting around drinking his face off every day in front of his kids and wife, and they can find somebody better to take care of them. So I think it's a complicated thing. I don't think you can say that this one combat experience then caused this guy to kill himself 10 years later. I think there's just so much that goes into that.
I don't care to pool large groups of people into a group necessarily, like veterans. Like there's tons of veterans, and oftentimes veterans get perceived, and this has to do with the history of the way veterans have been treated in this country. But today they're perceived as, and I think it's changed a bit, but growing up, I always perceive veterans as being kind of like the homeless guy in the corner, right? Like they're kind of perceived as weak. When if you look at the numbers, actually more veterans start businesses. Veterans actually do better in income levels than non-veterans. But when we get to this problem of suicide, for some reason, the veteran numbers are atrocious. And I'll give you an example. So, the average number of suicides per day, this is from Google's generative AI, which searches a bunch of different sites, including the Veterans Administration mental health records. The average number of suicides per day among U.S. adults rose from 81 per day in 2001 to 121 in 2020. Okay, this is just adults. This is not necessarily veterans.
Population at large.
Right. Yep. The average number of veteran suicides per day rose from 16.4 in 2001 to 16.8 in 2020. And we know it's higher than that probably over the last few years. So you have 121 per day in 2020. That's the population at large. And roughly 17 of those are veterans. That's an enormous.
Yeah, when you consider that what 1% actually serves.
Right. So you're talking 10% of the suicide, just the suicides writ large are veterans. I've talked about this before on this podcast, but there is a new line set up. It's 988. If you're having issues, any of the stuff that Chayse is talking about, call that number. Get some help. It's like there's people that are out there ready to help you.
Yeah, Nick, I appreciate you saying that and putting that out there for guys. But here's part of the problem with veteran suicide and the thought process that goes with it, right? How many veterans do you see ask for help on anything?
0. No, that's not true.
But it's pretty close. It's not far off, right?
Well,
you don't see a lot of veterans. In the military, you're told adapt and overcome, right? Figure it out, solve the problem. Right? If you don't have the resources, you need to find the resources. In the Marine Corps, it's acquire them. That means if you got to steal them, right? If you get what you need to get the mission done, and come tell the sergeant when the mission's done. Don't come tell the sergeant you don't have what you need or you don't know how to do it. Go figure it out. Like the book they give every private to read is Message to Garcia. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
So the storyline in Message to Garcia is they find this guy Garcia, and they say, "Hey, we need this letter delivered to the guerrilla force leader in Cuba."
Okay.
That's all they tell him.
Right.
Here's the letter. Get it to the guerrilla force leader in Cuba. Garcia doesn't go, well, where do I find him? How do I get to Cuba? What do I do when I get there? What resources do I have? He just says, Roger that, puts it in his coat pocket and takes off. And he figures it out on the way, right? That's what they teach you as a private. Read this book. This is how we want you to operate. Go figure it out. Don't come tell us you don't know how to do it, right? So you develop this mentality of solve problems, don't ask for help, get it done. So veterans do not ask as a whole. They don't reach out and they don't ask for help, especially about something private like that or embarrassing. In the Marine Corps, if a guy gets injured, everybody refers to him as a broke dick, right? Like you're like a leper.
Yeah.
You twisted your ankle on the morning run, but now you're like a leper that needs to go in the corner, and no one's going to talk to you until you're back to, full fitness again, and you can start running again. Like we don't even want to be associated with you in case your twisted ankle is contagious, right? Like you're useless to us because you're hurt. So you're conditioned to solve your own problems, and you're conditioned that if you have any kind of weakness, your fault or otherwise, don't tell anyone. That's why you have these guys that get out and they go to the VA to file a claim. There's nothing in their medical record because they never went to medical for anything because they didn't want to be the broke dick that's put in the corner and ostracized, right?
Yep.
So you have all these factors that come into conditioning a guy to not put his hand up like you just suggested and say, I need help.
Right.
Because I'm weak. Or I feel like I'm weak, right? He's not weak, but that's the perception he has about himself. If he needs help, he's weak. He can't get it done, right? So they don't ask for help. They just don't. They deal with it in their own head until they get to the point where they figure out what the best option to deal with it is. And sometimes for them, that's where it goes. I'm not a psychologist, man. That's just my perception.
I mean, it makes sense. What you're talking about is a cultural phenomena. You're talking about, this is the way we do it around here phenomena. That's what culture is. It's ultimately, this is the way we do it around here.
Yeah.
And it's definitely the case. And it's a very, what's the alternative? I don't want to hand Garcia the note and then have to give him 50,000 instructions. I don't want that.
Right.
As a leader, I want to give Garcia the note and I want Garcia to go get it done.
Right.
So, I mean, what is the change in the culture that would shift into the point where somebody having issues would be willing to say, you know what, I'm having some problems. I need to talk to somebody, or maybe I just don't need to talk to somebody. Maybe I just need somebody there.
Well, I think it goes back to culture, like you said. I don't think we need to change the message to Garcia training. You want that attitude. You need that attitude. That's mission success. You have to have that, right? And it's good for anybody in life. That's how you built your business. No one told Nick how to build his business. Nick said, I want a business. I'm going to figure this out. And every day I'm going to go slug away at it until I get stuff done. And I spent
a lot of time figuring stuff out, like Garcia probably did.
Yeah. Right. Because you had that attitude, right? You weren't like, hey, somebody come show me how to build this GeoInt business. Come teach me how to do it. No, you figured it out, right? So it's healthy to have that. You need to have that. But I think there's a couple other factors at play. And you mentioned the perception of veterans, right? You had this. You said, I have this idea in my head of like this helpless guy.
When I was a kid, I had that idea. My ideas obviously shifted.
Right, but that's what what you were shown.
Yes.
You were shown the broken guy in the wheelchair.
I'll also add that
right?
I might have a different perspective because my mother has worked and she's not retired, but she worked at the Veterans Administration for 36 years or something like that.
I was in there.
So I've seen tons of that.
Dude, I was in there for my annual physical on Friday of last week. And that's what you see. You see people that for whatever reason, veterans are in there and they're looking their most pathetic as they possibly can. Like there's a guy like
hospital,
slouched over with his head down, drooling on himself. And you're like, really, man? Like, are you that bad off? Is everybody that comes here for whatever reason that bad off that they have to look that pathetic all the time? Maybe, but I find that hard to believe, right? Because you go to a regular hospital and everybody doesn't look that pathetic. So I think
depends
you have,
on which hospital you're at.
Right.
Pretty bad.
But I think you have a couple factors at play. I think you have messaging, right? So we're talking about veteran suicide and mental health and all that kind of stuff, right? That's part of the problem. It gets talked about constantly. I think that's a problem. The more you talk about
shit, we better turn this off.
But hear me out. Hear me out. I think the more you talk about a problem, the bigger the problem can become. Sometimes not addressing an issue allows an issue to go away. Sometimes making the sore thumb the prominent object in the room of discussion just makes it throb more or whatever, right? Maybe that's not a great analogy, but
Well,
So,
I mean,
there's
something to that.
Let me get through it first. So
okay.
what I'm saying is, when all you hear in the media and in veteran circles and everywhere else is veteran suicide constantly, everywhere you go.
Right.
You're telling the active duty veteran population, when anytime they tune into the news or anything else and they hear about veterans, you're preconditioning them to think that when they leave service, there's something wrong with them. That the first time they experience adversity or stress or anxiety, that rather than just saying that's normal part of life, well, it must be because I'm a veteran. I mean, look at our suicide rate. There's something wrong with us. Right. Like our suicide rate's through the roof. Homelessness is through the roof. We have all these problems. So the first time you experience struggle, your default mode of thinking can easily just go, whether consciously or subconsciously, to, well, I can blame that on my service. Whether it's a conscious decision to blame it on your service or not, I think that negative messaging around the veteran population pre-programs military personnel to leave service and just assume that there's some things wrong with them. Whereas if you had the opposite messaging being put out, where like they do for business, right? This is a great example. What do you hear about for businesses? You only hear about the winners. Right. You hear about Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Gary Vee. Yeah. You hear about all these guys who are making billions of dollars and just looking like they're killing it, right? You don't see on the news the guy that lost his 401k and life savings trying to start a small business. Right. You don't see the thousands of people that file bankruptcy every year because their business doesn't work. You only hear about the successes. But we do the opposite with veterans. You only hear about the failures, the suicides, and the mental health problems and the homelessness. Well, why not put the guys that are winning on the pedestal and talk about them and show veterans like, look, you're stronger because of your service. You're better because of your service. You have more discipline. You have a better work ethic. You're a problem solver. All these things are in your favor, and change the attitude of woe is me because I'm a veteran to like, I can conquer the world because I'm a veteran. Look at all these other guys that are doing it, right? Like, why aren't we talking more about like Black Rifle? Right. And guys like you who are building amazing businesses and hiring veterans like crazy and doing all this good stuff. Why is that not the story that's in the news instead of another 22 veterans killed themselves? I mean, that's important, but the constant negative messaging, I think, just keeps everybody down, man.
Well, I think that's a great point. That's partially why you started the Veteran Business Collective. We could talk about that a little bit. But I wanted to hop back into the point that you were talking about in terms of just talking about something, making it more of a thing. And I remember studying this. It's something actually called the Werther effect in psychology. And it's basically what you're saying. When things are talked about more, and particularly in suicide, it can become a social contagion. And here's some information on what a suicide contagion is. A suicide contagion is the process by which one suicide or suicidal act in a school, community, or geographic area increases the likelihood that others will attempt or die by suicide. Suicide contagion can lead to a suicide cluster where a number of connected suicides occur following an initial death. Now, here's some information, and this is on teenagers because they tend to be more susceptible to this type of contagion, right? As teenagers, adolescents, right? Of course. Doesn't it make sense? According to the CDC, suicide clusters, again, that's the contagion taking over a particular group, particular area. Suicide clusters account for 1 to 5% of teen suicides in the United States. So that's a significant number, 1 to 5%. I mean, that's quite a bit. So it's definitely 100% a thing. Again, that's called the Werther effect, which was originally coined by David Phillips. So I mean, what you're talking about is there's truth to it.
I've never heard of that in that study, but you know, the more you like, they tell you like little kids, right? If you tell a little kid he's stupid and he's an idiot, he's going to act stupid and act like an idiot, right? Like that's where the whole self-esteem revolution came from with kids, right? Which evolved into this catastrophe of everybody gets a trophy, right? It went too far. But if you constantly tell somebody that they're an idiot and they can't do something, they'll start to believe it. over time, right? You beat them down to the point where they feel like that's true. But if you tell them the opposite, you can do it, eventually they'll believe that too, right? Your people are susceptible to programming. Propaganda works or we won't use it, right? So if you tell a population segment that this is who they are and this is what they've got to get out of, this is what they're going to get out of life, it's gonna end in misery and suicide because, you know, what their career field was.
Right.
Or whatever, right? Any population segment, any message you want to give them, that's the programming they receive. Well, how's that not going to have an effect? It's going to. Maybe not on every single one of them, but it's going to have an effect.
Yeah.
Well, why wouldn't the opposite have an effect too?
Of course.
Why wouldn't positive programming also have an effect? I think it would.
So let's flip the script then. Let's change over to this positive programming.
Absolutely.
Let's table the discussion on suicide. If you're having issues, call 988. Just do it. Don't look back. But also listen to this next segment because this is vitally important. So, Chayse, maybe you could tell us about the origins of the Veterans Business Collective and what it is and what the VBC is doing.
Sure. So the Veteran Business Collective was an idea that I had in 2020. I started thinking about it in winter of 2020 during the pandemic. I'm a small business owner locally in the service industry. And so I have the ability to, like, I have to hire subcontractors and do business with other people and stuff like that all the time. And it was just kind of sitting in the back of my head, like, why do I not know who other veteran business owners are? Like, I felt like we should be supporting each other. And if I can hire another veteran-owned company to help me on a project or to do something at my house, I'd prefer to do that. Not that someone else doesn't deserve the business, but I felt like I have a connection with veterans. I can expect a certain level of performance out of them because I know they all went to boot camp and they all learned certain character traits and had discipline and work ethic instilled and some integrity and things like that that were valuable in a business environment. So I started looking around to try and find out if there were other organizations already doing something similar to this. I went and checked out the legacy VSOs like the VFW and the American Legion. I went down to the VFW, great organization. They've done a lot for our country over the decades. But when you go down to the Post, there's 5 old guys there drinking dollar Tecates. And that's the extent of what they're doing, right? That's the extent of their activity. So I wasn't finding it there. I wasn't finding it with any of the other legacy VSOs. There's some modern VSOs that are doing good things in the business community, like providing incubator spaces and business boot camps and stuff like that. But they're more focused on tech startups and, that sort of thing. And I'm like, well, what about the guy who's a plumber that's already in business? Or the next guy that wants to run a welding business who's, he's a good welder. He wants to run his own business. He doesn't need an incubator space in an office building. He needs people to support him and to hire him and to give him business. That's what he needs. I couldn't find anything that was doing that. So I went to some of my buddies in town that are veterans. And I said, hey guys, I'm thinking about trying to start this group for veteran business owners to get together and like network and help each other out. What do you guys think about this? I think I floored it in front of 10 people at a Marine Corps birthday thing that fall or something. Right. And everyone was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. Let's do it. So we put a date on the calendar to meet up at a brewery, which was kind of funny because the brewery opened up for us. This was during lockdown during COVID. So we held our first Veteran Business Collective meeting illegally at a brewery during COVID lockdown, which is pretty cool. Keeping in Marine Corps tradition, being born in a bar and all that kind of stuff. We had 15 guys show up. And we just kind of talked through like, hey, we think we should be helping each other out. We should be referring business to each other. We think there's a lot of good things we can do if we just kind of start getting together. And at the end of it, we said, all right, well, what do we all think? Do we want to do this again? And everyone was like, yeah, let's do it again. So we put on the calendar for the next month and had 30 show up. And then we put on the calendar again for the next month and had 45 show up. And now 2.5, 3 years has it been later, we've got, we regularly have 60 to 80 that fill our monthly meetings in Wilmington. We've got a chapter in Jacksonville. We've got one in Tennessee. We've got one in the works in Tampa, one in the works in Columbia, South Carolina. We've done some bigger events where we've had 300 people show up, 4-star admirals show up to be guest speakers. We've had senators and congressmen come down to guest speak. We've had titans in the veteran business community. Like the founder of TRX came down and spoke at one of our events.
Randy Hetrick.
Yeah, Randy Hetrick came down. So it's been great. But what we found initially, after the first few was, okay, this is awesome. We're helping each other grow our businesses. We're doing business with each other. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens when you put a bunch of hard chargers in a room is they start solving other problems too. Mm-hmm. They start seeing opportunities to do more. And what we found, one of the side effects of just getting together was that we were addressing a need that the veteran community had that was outside of the business community. Mm-hmm. And is specifically providing, this sounds corny, and I hate using this term, but
you're going to use it anyways.
I'm going to use it anyways because I think it's applicable, but it's corny as I'll get out. Is we had created a safe place for post 9/11 veterans to be post 9/11 veterans. Right. They didn't feel like they fit in at the VFW because everybody there is 70 or older. Right. And they're in their late 20s and 30s. And, like now me, 40, I was in 01 when it all started, and now I'm 40. So we're significantly younger. Our war experience was different. We were at war for 20 years in 2 different theaters. Right. Our lifestyle is different. Modern life is different compared to the Vietnam generation. So there's just a lot of things that aren't the same. And there wasn't a place where these guys were getting together post-service. Mm-hmm. And what we started to see is that a lot of the problems that develop are because guys are trying to deal with their issues in isolation. They leave service, they go back to their hometown or wherever, and now they're trying to fit into a whole new culture that they're not used to. When they went to service, it was from high school. Well, adult life's different than high school, right? Civilians are different than military. So, you spend, Marine Corps, it's like 13 weeks having your entire civilian existence flushed out of your system and being taught how to think and operate in a different manner, to include what you find humorous, to include what you find acceptable as far as your speech and your language and everything else. Well, now when you leave, you go back to the civilian world where they like that you work hard, but they don't like the way you talk.
Yeah.
They don't think your jokes are appropriate. You're going to go to HR for, half the stuff that comes out of your mouth. And so I think that kind of exacerbates a lot of other issues that are going on, and it just kind of compounds. So we found is people would come. We got one guy that shows up every month, and when we do our intros around the room, he goes, "I don't own anything. I just like drinking beer with you guys."
Yeah.
Right. Like he doesn't own a business. Yeah. He just likes the camaraderie, right? He just likes to be able to be there and be himself for a night and talk the way that he likes to talk, not have to be on his P's and Q's because he's worried about getting sent to HR. He can BS with the other veterans about whatever their experience was or whatever's going on in life, and just feel like he's not going to be judged for it. And once a month, he can get that fixed and feel good about himself. And so we saw that there was this draw that went beyond, I just need referrals to grow my business. And now it's turned into, we've got a great relationship with the Honor Foundation, where we've got active duty guys who are getting ready to transition from active duty to civilian world that come down to see what it is people do outside the military other than just go try and get a job somewhere.
Right.
There's other options. So they're coming down to networking. I've got guys that call me all the time because they've heard of me through the VBC network as somebody who knows something about business. And they're like, "Hey, I think I want to start a business. Will you talk to me?" It's like, "Yeah, I'll talk to you." But really what you want to do is you want to come to one of our meetings and talk to 80 of us and get 80 different perspectives and opinions on 80 different types of businesses. So it's turned into this really cool resource that provides value across a broad spectrum of post 9/11 generation veteran needs outside of what the original idea was. And it's super cool to see it.
I think, you hit on a good point. What really drew me to it, so I'm on the board of directors, and when I originally talked to you about this, you were kind of running it through another nonprofit, and they weren't really supporting. So I think, our discussion was more along the lines of, yeah, you just should do your own thing because it's going to be better. And one of the reasons why it is better is because if you look at the other, and you talk about this a bit, but if you look at the other veteran organizations, I don't think our generation wants to wear that funny hat that they do at the VFW.
Oh gosh, dude,
the VFW is cool.
On that, man.
The VFW is cool. It's awesome. Dude. But nobody wants to wear some hat. Nobody wants to go back into having a rank. Like, we just want to, I think, like you're talking about.
And Yes, that's one of the main difference. So the post 9/11 generation was at war the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Post 9/11, everybody's been at war up until, well, I mean, the guys I work with in the MARSOC community, they're still at war. They're just in different places, right? But they were in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years. So what they found important in their service is different than maybe the guys that served from 76 to 2000,
right?
That didn't have anything going on other than the occasional skirmish here or there. Desert Storm, which was, how long was that? Like a few months? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about a long time here.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge ground campaign, right? Not that stuff didn't happen, but it wasn't 20 years of continuous combat. You know, in 2005, I already had peers that were in the infantry while I was in security forces that already had like 8 combat deployments.
Yeah.
By 2005. Like they were just gone constantly, right? You've got guys that are retiring with 20 plus combat rotations.
And girls.
So I say guys generally, right? Like when I talk to girls, it's I talk to my wife and daughter. I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? Right? Like, okay. I'm not trying to exclude anybody. Gosh, you and your PC HR.
Yeah. Well, don't worry.
But anyway, so the things that became important were different, right? Like in peacetime, what do you have to focus on? I mean, the first sergeants run around and they're worried about haircuts and
off the grass.
Yeah. Get off the grass. Don't put footprints. Are your boots polished? What's your uniform look like? Right.
Yeah.
Your training budget's small, so you don't have a ton
polishing boots.
I remember doing that.
I remember doing that. Spending hours just sitting there with all
because you didn't have anything else to do, man.
Polishing the boot.
Once war starts, the budget changes. And all of a sudden your training budget goes from like 8 rounds a year per guy to thousands. So now when you're not deployed, you have tons of time to spend training because you have the resources for it. So you're in the field actually preparing for, you're going to war. You know where you're going in 6 months. There's no question about it. And you're talking to the units over there. They're taking casualties. So the focus shifts away from ceremony and parade and pomp and circumstance to war fighting. And the guys and gals, when they leave service, they want to maintain the work ethic, the discipline, the patriotism, the pride in service.
Right.
But they don't want to maintain the pomp and circumstance.
Exactly.
Right. And so I've had other VSOs reach out, like, I'm gonna put their name out there. I hope that they listen and I hope that they take it to heart, because I went to one of their meetings and had the same discussion with them, but the Marine Corps League. I went to one of their meetings as a guest speaker to talk to them about the VBC and how I'm filling a room with 80 veterans and why their monthly, they own a building for their meetings. Like they own their own building and they got 6 people that show up and they're all officers that rotate through the same positions.
Right.
Because nobody else shows up and they can't attract any younger people. They're all like over 65.
Right.
Well, I get there and they're wearing their like service uniforms.
What?
Yeah. They're wearing core frames, dude. They're wearing core frames with trousers, like a Charlie shirt, the short sleeve service shirt with ribbons. And they're wearing like the hat, the piss cutter. We call them piss cutters. They're wearing that to these meetings. And I'm like, guys, I went like this, t-shirt, camel board shorts and flip flops.
Yeah.
I'm like, and they got rank on and all this stuff. And we had to sing the national anthem. We had to sing the Marine Corps hymn. We had to listen to
with 6 other people.
With Anchor, it was 6 people. Anchors away and all this stuff. We said the Pledge of Allegiance and all that's great, right? But dude, like people want to go to a bar with good beer, hang out with people that they understand and be productive.
Or even okay beer.
Or even okay beer, right? But not dollar Tecates. Right. And so I'm telling these guys, I'm like, look, you're not going to get my generation in here because they don't want to dress like this.
Right.
They don't, even though you own your own building, they don't want to hang out in here. They want to go to the microbrewery where they can order a good burger and have a nice beer in a nice environment because they've earned it. And that's where they'd prefer to spend their time. And they can take their wife there and feel good about it instead of like sitting in this sterile room with a flag in the corner and putting on their core frames for an hour every Tuesday evening, right? Like you got to modernize and they don't want to, they don't want to.
Okay. So the VBC, I'll put all the links to this in the description. So check out the description below. Make sure you click the link and sign up. Support VBC. I know. We're looking to open more chapters to support more veterans and more veteran businesses. And how do they reach out to you if somebody wants to start a chapter in a new location and they like the vibe of First of all, I think you should, if you are in the local North Carolina area, or out near Tri-Cities, Tennessee, you should locate Veteran Business Collective meeting and go attend one and kind of just get a feel for what it's like. It's more social than anything. It's not, we're not singing national anthems. We might do a toast.
We always do a toast to the fallen at the end. I think it's important to ground ourselves in the fact that we come from service.
Yeah.
And we did do something meaningful for a long time, and we lost a lot of people on the way. So we always do finish our meetings with a toast to the fallen. And that's about the closest to like formality that we get.
Right.
Is raising a beer to the fallen. I mean, that's about it.
And if you can't do that, then
we don't want you anyways.
You shouldn't show up.
We don't want you anyways.
Okay. So what's cool is you talked about a bit is, the veteran business owners networking and things like that. Are veterans better business owners? Should veterans be opening more businesses? You talked about like portraying this positive image of veterans.
Yeah, I think that veterans are well suited to business ownership, and I think there's a lot of things that veterans understand because of their service that maybe somebody else might not, that didn't have the same thing. The military is highly systematized, right? Everything is established. It's doctrine. Everything is established processes and procedures, which is what a business needs to succeed. So let's say you're buying a franchise. Well, they already have doctrine written. All you got to do is learn it and execute it, right? And if you're in the military, you should be able to understand how to do that. You should be able to be handed a pub and say, this is how you execute this business, follow this plan, and you follow the plan, right? They've done that. They know how to do that. They also understand what that looks like, so they should be able to write their own systems if they're going to start something on their own. They understand what it takes to get up every morning, go to work hard, work with an end goal in mind, not just be busy for the sake of being busy, right? But set goals, have discipline to achieve those goals, be consistent over time. The work ethic's there, the discipline's there, the ability to follow systems and procedures and develop systems and procedures are there. Leadership is there, which you need if you're going to be more than a business of one, right? If you're not going to be self-employed, but if you're going to have other people, you have to have some leadership. Everybody that's been in the military, even if you only got to the rank of E2, was in charge of somebody else at some point. You get more leadership training in boot camp than anybody does in 4 years of college or a master's degree or anything. It's all leadership, right?
And it's not management training, it's leadership, which is I always say that in the military, you're for sure going to learn two things. You're going to learn what great leaders look like, and you're going to learn what bad leaders look like. Yeah, for sure. You're going to get that exposure. So when you
I've been both.
Right. Well, you hope you haven't been a bad leader.
Oh, I was a terrible one for a I absolutely. Yeah, man. Because it's like you said, like initially my examples of what leadership was in the Marine Corps was terrible. I didn't know it at the time because I was a young, dumb 18-year-old. And so when I came in and saw how the NCOs and staff NCOs did things, I was like, oh, that's just the way the Marine Corps does stuff. Right. So that's how we get things done, is you scream and yell and you act like an idiot, and that's how you get things done, right? Well, that's how they do it in boot camp. That's not really leadership, though. That's conditioning for boot camp to make a basically trained Marine that follows orders, right?
There are times, though, when you got to yell and scream.
There are times, but that shouldn't be your default mode, right? Like, as reasonable people, if we can't just say, hey, man, you need to do this for this reason, and it doesn't get done, like, you got a bigger problem, right? Yelling doesn't always solve that. But so I mean, I had a time when I was a junior NCO where, looking back, I'm like, dude, you were an idiot. You were an idiot. You defaulted to, power plays over, positional authority rather than leading authentically. Just that's how the Marine Corps does stuff. And it took going to MARSOC and having to lead peers to learn a new way.
Yeah, that'll change your perspective.
Yeah, when you have to lead people that are the same rank as you and you have no positional authority, you have to actually like be a leader then to get them to do things.
You have to tell people why they're doing something and not just
or get them to just believe because of what you're doing.
Right.
Right. You can't just be like do it or you go to jail, which is what positional authority is in the Marine Corps. I mean, that's really what it is, right? Like that's why these commanders, they say, I led 4,000 people and and I had all this success. And it's like, yeah, because if someone disagreed with you, they were still going to do it because you, at the end of the day, can literally put them in jail if they don't do what you tell them to.
Well, I think that's I mean, we could talk about problems in the military.
Yeah.
That's one of my problems with the military is that there's a separate enlisted and officer thing. And it's like, well, you should maybe put the best person in charge, not necessarily just because they got a degree or something like that.
OCS instead of
it seems completely arbitrary to me.
That's a whole. We could spend hours on that one.
We don't have
save that one for another day.
How much time do you have?
Yeah.
You know, like
we'll do another one on that later.
I want to jump back into veteran businesses really quickly. Here's some more information from the Census Bureau. This is from 2021. So veteran-owned businesses made up about 5.9%. So this is about 337,000 of all businesses, with an estimated 947.7 billion with a B receipts, approximately 3.9 million employees, and about 177.7 billion in annual payroll. In other words, veterans are doing the thing. And that's a great success story, and you would not hear that.
No.
I'm gonna throw these numbers out here again. Veteran-owned businesses made up about 6% of all businesses, 5.9%, with almost $1 trillion in receipts annually.
I would bet that number is even higher because
this is from 2021 Census Bureau. Yeah,
I'd say it's probably higher because they're not really good at collecting data on which businesses are veteran-owned and not. Like a lot of the states don't really collect it that well. They don't track it very well, so it's probably higher.
Yeah, and I'll tell you right now, I get those little census things in the mail. I'm not touching them. I'm not filling out paper. I'm a digital guy. I want everything digital.
Yeah.
Send it to me digitally, and I'll fill it out. But
But North Carolina, up until I think last year or the year before, they didn't track which businesses that were registered in North Carolina were veteran-owned or not.
Yeah,
no idea.
How do you actually know? Like,
and there was no box on federal paperwork when you file your return. Are you veteran-owned? They only ask if you're white or Hispanic.
Yeah, how would they know what the receipts are?
If you're black, right? So, I mean, that could be just a sampling of who's registered, like with sam.gov, which is a pretty limited.
Well, that would be very limited. That would only be federal contractors.
Right, right. So I'm betting that number is significantly higher than what that estimate is.
Yeah, if you know what the actual number is, let us know.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting to know. Is there anything else you want to put out there about the VBC veteran businesses? I
don't know. I think we covered it all.
Okay.
If you're somewhere outside of where there's a current VBC, you can follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can get in touch with us through Facebook, LinkedIn, or our website, veteranbusinesscollective.org. We are open to the idea of chapters in other states and areas. We've got a couple in the works now. We haven't really done any active outreach to do that. It's all just been people coming to us and saying, we like what you're doing. Can we do this where we are? And that starts the discussion. So if you're interested, if you check us out online and you see what we're doing and you think your community might benefit from it, then reach out to us and let's start the conversation. Okay, cool. Chayse, appreciate you being here, man. Great discussion. Thanks for sharing all those awesome stories. And, let's definitely do it again. Absolutely, man. Appreciate you. All right, cool. Take care, y'all.